I'm not trying to turn you into me. I'm trying to turn you into you.
He was never the classically handsome movie star, not like Paul Newman or Robert Redford. Those leading men whose very presence lit up the screen, but with sheer talent and a kind of raw, unflinching honesty. Dustin Hoffman rewrote the rules of Hollywood. His performances were so authentic, they left America speechless. Have you ever watched a film where the main character wakes up in a sunlit room overlooking the ocean? Dustin Hoffman doesn't have to watch it. He lives it. He owns a $15 million beachfront estate in Malibu and a private screening room inside his sprawling 15,000 square foot home in Los Angeles. And yet, you'll never see him flaunting any of it. Just like he never paraded his setbacks those moments when, even at the peak of his fame, Hollywood seemed to turn its back. There was a film that flopped, and the critics didn't just criticize the movie, they went after Hoffman himself. But the way he rose again, quietly, without spectacle, earned him the respect of an entire industry. Today, we take a closer look at the life of Dustin Hoffman from the leanest, hardest days to the brightest moments of triumph. He grew up in a cramped apartment, wearing hand-me-downs from his older brother, called Big Nose by his classmates, and no one ever expected he'd amount to much. So what makes a child like that timid, overlooked, believe he was born to be on a stage? Dustin Hoffman was born in 1937 in Los Angeles to a working-class Jewish family. His father had once worked in theater, but gave it up to sell furniture just to make ends meet. His mother stayed home, managing a frugal life inside a modest rental apartment. He grew up with little money, and even less belief from the people around him. His clothes were always secondhand. Classmates made fun of his short stature and unusually large nose. No one bullied him outright, but he was never picked for the lead role. No one ever looked at him and said, "That boy belongs on a stage." In that silence, Dustin found comfort in the piano. Music became a place to retreat away to listen inward and imagine a world far beyond the four walls of his small room. At age 10, as he grew more aware of his Jewish roots, he began to understand a deep sense of otherness that, until then, had no name. It wasn't just about how he looked, it was the quiet realization that if he wanted to be heard, he'd have to step outside the safe, expected path. When he told his family he wanted to quit college to pursue acting, they didn't protest loudly, but it was clear no one thought it was realistic. They encouraged him to choose something stable, but Dustin knew that kind of safety was reserved for those who had always fit the mold. At 19, he walked into his first audition at a small community theater in Pasadena. Under a lone spotlight in a bare room, Dustin performed with every ounce of loneliness he had carried for years. No one laughed. No one turned away. The entire room fell silent. In that room sat another unknown Gene Hackman. They didn't meet as future stars. They met as two men quietly trying to survive doubt. For the first time, Dustin, the boy who was never picked, held an audience in complete silence. And that day, he made a vow: if you're not tall, not handsome, then act with such truth that no one dares to look away. But the question remained, could a man with no money, no looks, and no connections survive in New York, a city that doesn't wait for anyone? Hollywood said he didn't fit the mold. New York made him struggle. So what secret gave a short, awkward young man the courage to challenge an entire industry built around faces that looked just right? New York in the 1960s was not forgiving. The city was fast, cold, and had no patience for anyone still trying to find themselves. Dustin Hoffman arrived with nothing but a dream to become an actor, even though no one thought he looked the part. He survived on the kindness of friends, sharing a tiny apartment with Gene Hackman and Robert Duvall. The space barely fit a few beds. The refrigerator wheezed, and every morning they lined up to use a single bathroom. Dinner was usually a cold sandwich from a corner deli by the train station. By day, Dustin drove delivery trucks, cleaned hospital floors, and washed dishes. Once, he delivered food late to a difficult customer who snapped at him, Don't you know what it means to be on time?" That line echoed in his head the rest of the night. By night, he took classes at the neighborhood playhouse, studying acting in stuffy rooms that smelled of sweat and old chalk. But every audition seemed to end with the same uncertain glance. You don't quite fit what the director has in mind. Not tall, not classically handsome, not someone an audience would easily believe in a romantic lead. But the hardest part was that no one stuck around long enough to notice he had something different. Could someone like that survive in a city packed with faces that looked brighter, cleaner, more suitable? He made brief appearances in Naked City, The Defenders. The Tiger makes out small roles, no posters, no headlines. Some nights, he sat quietly in the corner of a cafe on West 4th Street, listening to a street saxophonist, the glow of the street lamp washing over his tired face, asking himself, is this the end or the beginning? Then the phone rang. Another audition. It seemed probably another no. But this time, it was Mike Nichols, the director, searching for a lead in The Graduate. He had already seen dozens of fresh-faced hopefuls, but none of them were quite right. When Dustin walked in, Nichols laughed, not to mock him, but because he suddenly knew this awkward, slightly nervous young man was exactly what the role needed. Dustin got the part. He was paid $20,000 after taxes, just about $4,000. But the film became a cultural phenomenon, earning over $100 million. American audiences sat in silence, not because they saw a perfect movie star, but because, for the first time, they saw themselves on screen unsure, uncomfortable, heartbreakingly real. He didn't fit Hollywood's mold, but he gave people something they didn't know they needed: truth. Unpolished and undeniable. Then came Midnight Cowboy, where Dustin played Ratso Rizzo, a crippled, worn-down hustler scraping by on the streets of Manhattan. No one thought such a character could break hearts, but as Dustin limped down the boulevard, past honking cars and flickering streetlights, audiences couldn't look away. Then came 1970. A bomb exploded just blocks from Dustin's apartment in Greenwich Village. The weathermen had built it, and the blast shook the entire neighborhood. He heard the shattering glass, the sirens, stepped out onto his balcony and saw smoke and flashing red lights swallowing the street below. In that moment, Dustin realized no amount of success shields you from chaos, and if everything collapsed tomorrow, what would still be there to hold you up? He had walked through doors that once slammed shut in his face, but what lay ahead wasn't just fame, it was the true cost of being someone who never quite fit the mold. He didn't walk into Hollywood to become a movie star. Dustin Hoffman entered as an outsider and forced the industry to ask itself who really deserves to be in the spotlight. After The Graduate, he didn't chase superhero roles or billionaire scripts. He chose Kramer vs. Kramer, playing a clumsy father learning to care for his son after a divorce. The scene where he spills milk on the table brought audiences to tears, not because of technique, but because the emotion was so painfully real. His first Oscar came from that honesty. Then came Rain Man, the role of Raymond, a man with autism. No shouting, no extreme transformations, just a hesitant touch of the hand. And the entire theater went silent. 2 Academy Awards, 6 Golden Globes, over 8 Oscar and BAFTA nominations, and more than $2 billion in global box office from the films he starred in. For over 2 decades, Hoffman was one of Hollywood's highest-paid actors. Just Rain Man and Hook alone earned him nearly $10 million by the mid-1990s. His net worth had surpassed $50 million, an astonishing figure for someone once told he was too plain to be a leading man. Even when he directed his first film at age 75, Quartet, he didn't seek headlines. And for a younger generation, he's the voice of Master Shifu, the stern but loving mentor in Kung Fu Panda. He never tried to be someone else, and that truth is exactly what made people feel seen. Many expect fame to be followed by bright lights, gates, and sprawling estates. But Dustin Hoffman didn't live that way, maybe because he'd spent too long in the shadows, so when the spotlight finally found him, He chose to move slowly and close the door behind him. His home in Broad Beach, Malibu, isn't perched on some hill behind iron gates. It sits quietly among a row of beachfront houses, where the sound of the waves tells stories at night. Valued at roughly $15 million, the home reflects a Moroccan-influence, soft arches, aged terracotta tile, and handcrafted wood floors. One side opens to the Pacific, the other to a private library where he still reads through old scripts. Inside, the space is simple: a few abstract paintings, an old upright piano, and one framed photo his whole family laughing during a picnic. When a reporter once asked why he doesn't display his Oscars or other accolades, he simply said, "I don't need reminders of what I've tried to forget." To others, it's a luxury estate. To him, it's an escape. His Los Angeles residence tells a different story. Over 15,000 square feet, not flashy, but layered with memory. Vines cover the entrance. The lighting inside is soft, like stage lights before the curtain rises. Here, everything carries meaning: an old sofa from the 80s still marked by a daughter's ink scribble. A solid oak table where he once hosted Mike Nichols on a spring evening. And a hallway lined with bookshelves holding first prints of Rain Man and Kramer vs. Kramer. With sticky notes written in trembling hands, this scene I wasn't sure I could pull off. There's one room no one enters: his study. The walls are covered in behind-the-scenes photos, film scores, and letters from fans that were never answered. He doesn't reread them, but he doesn't throw them away either. This space isn't for display. It's to remember what he's walked through and how. In 2017, Hoffman invested in a renovation project in the Hollywood Hills. The plan was to expand and flip the property, but his partner defaulted. The project collapsed. He lost millions. The media never caught wind of it, and he never made a statement. But from that moment on, he stopped seeing homes as investments. He'd lived in enough houses that weren't truly his to know the value of a quiet place that feels like it is. Today, people say he lives off the radar. No red carpet appearances, no interviews, no Instagram selfies, but those who visited one of the places he calls home say the same thing. There's not a lot of light, but it makes you feel at peace. He once drove a cab to survive. Now, he can choose any car he wants, but when Dustin Hoffman gets behind the wheel, it's never about speed or status. It's about the feeling of turning off the main road just for an afternoon. His steel silver Porsche Carrera S was the first car he bought for himself after Rain Man. Not to show off, but because he remembered spotting that exact model while delivering takeout years earlier and thinking, if I ever get to drive that, maybe life will be different. Today, that car's worth around $130,000, but for him, its true value lies in wiping it down on weekends and driving his grandkids along Pacific Coast Highway. No radio, just the sound of wind and the hum of the engine. It's not a sports car, it's a reward for the kid who once got passed over because he wasn't charming enough. The second is the opposite: a pitch-black Tesla Roadster, sleek and almost emotionless. But he chose it because it's quiet. Some days, I just want to drive without hearing anything but myself. He once said, "No one expects a man born in 1937 to prefer electric," but that's Dustin unpredictable, unapologetic. The Roadster cost over $150,000 when released, and he still drives it early in the morning, before Malibu fully wakes up, before anyone can ask where he's going. Then there's his most used car, a gray Range Rover, not because it's beautiful, but because it's practical. It's the one that takes him grocery shopping, to his wife's doctor appointments, or to pick up the grandkids. Among all the cars that turn heads, he picks one that helps him blend in. Once asked why he doesn't collect exotic cars like other actors his age, he simply smiled. "I walked for a lot of years. For me, a car doesn't have to prove anything, it just has to get me home." Dustin Hoffman once said, "I'm famous in the street, but at home, I just do the dishes when it's my turn." He's been married to Lisa Gottsagen since 1980, a woman with no ties to Hollywood, but every reason to be his anchor. She runs her own organic food company, rarely appears in public, and almost never joins him on the red carpet. Dustin once joked, "If I bring the spotlight home, she'll turn it off." In their Los Angeles home, one side holds a script library. The other is the kitchen where Lisa makes lentil soup every Sunday. There, he doesn't perform. He learns to just be. He makes the coffee, writes the grocery list, and listens, really listens, when his wife talks about a day that has nothing to do with movies. The man who lived on applause now lives for the small stories told over dinner. They raised 6 children, including Jake Hoffman, a director who once acted alongside his father in Barney's version. But Dustin never pushed expectations. He only hoped his kids would know who they are and not be afraid if that answer changes over time. In his free time, he still plays piano, a habit since childhood. Some nights, when sleep doesn't come, he'll sit and play a quiet melody not for fun, but to keep from drifting too far. That's how a man once rejected by Hollywood for being wrong for the part finally found a place where no one had to prove anything. And maybe that's why, despite having a fortune worth tens of millions, he still lives simply breakfast at the same local diner, wearing a worn-out button-down, driving himself to the market each week. One fan, spotting him in Venice Beach, once said, "I always thought Dustin Hoffman would be taller, or better looking," and he smiled. So did I. Not every star chases the spotlight. Some, like Hoffman, just choose to be themselves. There's something Hollywood rarely says out loud sometimes. You can lose everything not because you gave a bad performance, but simply because you were in the wrong place, at the wrong time. In 1987, at the very height of his career, Dustin Hoffman took on the lead in Ishtar, an ambitious, high-budget film with enormous expectations. But when it premiered, it became a box office disaster. The press called it a monumental flop from 2 Academy Award winners. Critics were relentless. And even though Hoffman was paid $6 million, the real cost was his reputation suddenly. It was hanging by a thread. One failed film and people seemed to forget all the roles that had once moved them to tears. For a while, Dustin went quiet. He returned in smaller, quieter roles. And then Rain Man came along, restoring his critical acclaim. But what happened behind the scenes was far more complicated. By 2017, another challenge emerged, this time off the screen, during the rise of the Me Too movement. Several women came forward, accusing Hoffman of inappropriate behavior during past productions. He wasn't sued, he wasn't taken to court, but he became the center of a public reckoning. He didn't fully deny the allegations. Instead, he issued a public apology acknowledging that if he had made anyone uncomfortable, it was something he could never forgive himself for. Audiences were split. Some felt disappointed. Others stayed silent. And for the first time in his life, Dustin didn't know whether to speak or to simply step back. At the same time, something else happened, quietly and without headlines. Dustin had invested millions into a luxury home renovation in the Hollywood Hills, but his business partner went bankrupt. The property sat abandoned for years, tangled in legal disputes. He lost the entire investment. It wasn't that the loss wasn't significant, it was, but Hoffman never spoke about it, never complained. He just kept living, kept working. In 2024, he returned once again, voicing Master Shifu in Kung Fu Panda 4 and appearing at Cannes in Megalopolis, Francis Ford Coppola's long-awaited film. No major PR campaign, no loud declarations of a comeback. Just an 87-year-old man standing quietly on set. Eyes a little more tired, but still holding on to what mattered most, the belief that acting is not a job, but a way of being. He didn't defend himself. He didn't run from the past, because some mistakes can't be undone, but they can be lived with honesty and humility. So after all that, what's left? An Oscar, a forgotten scandal, or something more? When the spotlight fades and the applause dies down, what remains for someone who's spent a lifetime playing other people? For Dustin Hoffman, The legacy isn't the 2 Oscars on the shelf. It's not the million-dollar contracts or the blockbusters he turned down. What remains is the way he helped the world see film not just as entertainment, but as a mirror to ourselves. From Benjamin Braddock in The Graduate, to Ted Kramer, Raymond Babbitt, and even the voice of Master Shifu, he taught us that a hero on screen doesn't need to be handsome, they just need to be real. He didn't reshape himself to fit Hollywood. He made Hollywood expand its idea of what a leading man could be. Dustin Hoffman changed the definition of leading role. He made us believe that being vulnerable, lost, or imperfect could still be worthy of love. But perhaps the greatest legacy he leaves behind isn't on film, it's within his own home. A father to 6 children, a grandfather who still sits at the piano each night, a husband who's remained devoted to the same woman for more than 4 decades, in a world where loyalty often feels like a fragile thing. And at 87, he's still working, not because he needs the money, but because he never believed he was finished. To him, every new character is another chance to live more truthfully than before. Dustin Hoffman isn't leaving behind a glittering kingdom of wealth. He's leaving behind a path for those who didn't fit the mold, but dared to step into the spotlight anyway. And what about you? Have you ever been judged for not being the right type? Is there a role in your life that still feels unfinished? If Dustin's story moved you, if you've ever cried during one of his films, or simply saw a piece of yourself in his quiet strength, leave a comment below. Share your thoughts, or just tell us the name of the film that stayed with you. And if you believe in stories that are lived honestly, deeply, and with quiet grace, don't forget to like and subscribe.